This episode is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Do you ever find yourself playing the budgeting game? Shifting a little money here, a little there, and hoping it all works out? Well, with the Name Your Price tool from Progressive, you can be a better budgeter and potentially lower your insurance bill too. You tell Progressive what you want to pay for car insurance, and they'll help you find options within your budget. Try it today at progressive.com. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Price and coverage match limited by state law. Not available in all states.
Hello, welcome to Strong Sense of Place.
In each episode, we focus on one destination and discuss what makes it different than any other place on Earth.
Then we recommend 5 books we love that took us there on the page.
I'm Melissa Joelwan.
I'm David Humphreys.
We're going around the world, one great read at a time.
Thanks for joining us. Welcome to Strong Sense of Place. Today we get curious about Norway. If you're listening to this on launch day, we're only 4 days away from the Oya Festival. That's an event where 60,000 people gather in a field in Oslo to dance and enjoy the world. This year's headliners are Janelle Monáe and Andre 3000.
Oh, that sounds really fun.
Yeah, it does. In Two Truths and a Lie, we'll talk about the unusual way Norwegians celebrate one of the major holidays. It's not all milk chocolate rabbits and colored eggs up there, I'll tell you what. And then we'll talk about 5 books we love.
I'm recommending a book that makes running away to an island above the Arctic Circle seem like an excellent idea.
I've got a story about a World War II undercover operation that goes horribly, horribly wrong.
Bad for the people, great for the readers.
Yeah, definitely more of a good story than a good time. But first, Mel's going to bring us up to speed with the Norway 101.
This is the 101.
All right, let's get oriented. Visualize Europe. Head straight north from Germany, and you'll run into the Scandinavian peninsula. Norway hugs the west coast, with Sweden and Finland to the east. And then way up north, Norway kind of curves to the east a little bit.
Yeah.
And a tiny bit of it butts up against Russia.
Yeah, it gets really complicated up there, where they all sort of tilt inward toward Russia. And then I read this while I was doing the research. There is one country between Norway and North Korea.
Enormous Russia?
Enormous Russia. What the heck?
That's a good trivia question. 1/3 of Norway is in the Arctic Circle.
Whoa.
Including the Lofoten Islands and the city of Tromsø. They're 2 of the best places to see the northern lights.
Also, Tromsø looks cute.
It has a really beautiful cathedral, too.
Yeah.
Norway also owns the islands of Svalbard in the Arctic Ocean, which are very alluring in a way that might get you killed.
We talked about Svalbard a bit in our Arctic episode.
We did, and I'll put a link to that episode in the show notes.
It's one of the only places in the world you can go without a visa. They will accept anybody from anywhere.
I'm also a little obsessed with a YouTuber who regularly shares her life in Svalbard.
Yes.
A lot of fairy lights in the winter, a lot of doing stuff outside in the summer.
A lot of good dogs.
Yes. Norway has 2 official spoken languages, Norwegian and Sami. Sami are the reindeer herders in northern Norway. The capital of Norway is Oslo. It's a city made up of islands, and it's located in the southeast part of the country. And it definitely has a city vibe, but nature is like right there.
Yeah. Yeah, we went to Oslo last year, and it reminded me a lot of Anchorage, which is the other city I've been to where it feels like if humans stopped thinking about it for 20 minutes, nature would just rush right in. I'm just right here. What do you need?
Oslo is also home to the Nobel Peace Prize and the Munch Museum, where you can see the famous Scream painting in all of its glorious angst.
Yeah, it strikes me funny that the Norwegian culture, who I sort of perceive as generally happy, also take a lot of pride in owning the screen.
Humans are multi-layered.
They are.
One of my favorite things we did when we were in Oslo was to go to the Fram Museum. The Fram is named for a ship that's the heart of the museum, and it's basically immersing you in what it would have been like to go on an Arctic expedition in the late 1800s.
Yeah.
They've got this enormous ship inside the building, and you can walk onto its decks, and then they simulate a storm with audio and visual effects.
Yeah.
And then you go below decks into the quarters and see how the explorers lived on the ship.
Yeah.
It was just super nerdy fun.
It was amazing because on one hand, they put a ship in a building and so it feels large, but then as soon as you get on the ship and you think about trying to share that space with a dozen or so men for months and months, wow, it feels a lot different.
Little cozy.
Yeah.
I particularly like that they had the mess where you go to eat on the ship and described what you would be eating and who would be sitting where. Like, it really made it come to life.
They had little rooms where books were sort of out and games were half played and that kind of thing. It was nice little touches to make it feel alive.
Also, you could convince yourself you might see a ghost out of the corner of your eye.
It would not be hard to do that.
The Fram is on an island with a couple of other museums, the Kontiki, a maritime museum, and a lighthouse.
Yeah.
And it's a really fun day out because you take a boat to get there, so you get to be out on the water. And then it's like you've time traveled into the past. It was great. One of the best ways to see the rest of Norway is on a train from Oslo to Bergen. Bergen is on the west coast. So you're bisecting Norway on this amazing train ride.
Yeah, the train ride was just spectacular.
It takes about 6 hours.
Yeah.
And you pass through scenery that makes you feel like you stepped into a folktale. We spent a big chunk of our time in the cafe car next to an enormous window.
Yeah, that was a lovely time. We just sort of sat there and drank coffee and watched some of the most gorgeous countryside I've ever seen go past the window with waterfalls and farmlands and forests and just lovely, like wildlife.
The hills look like trolls sleeping on their sides, and then there are really jaggy mountains that have powdered sugar snow on the top of them. I was particularly taken with the wooden bridges that looked like someone had made them by hand that cross the little streams.
Yeah.
And then the sky is so blue and the green is so green. So after you've been through all of that beautiful nature, you arrive in Bergen. And the Bergen train station looks a little bit like a Victorian Gothic orphanage, which is really appealing when it's foggy out. If you've been on Instagram ever, you've probably seen the wooden buildings along Bergen's Wharf. They kind of look like Lego houses in bright colors. Yellow, red, orange, white, with very blue sky and very blue water.
I think they need the bright colors to keep the long, dark winter at bay.
Mm-hmm. In the 14th century, this was the base for the Hanseatic League. If you're not up on your trade routes of the Middle Ages.
And, shame on you for not being up on your trade routes of the Middle Ages.
The Hanseatic League was a network of medieval merchant guilds.
Yeah.
So basically they were trading. Bergen was the center for cold water fish like cod. So they were trading cod fillets and cod liver oil and dried cod for flour, salt, beer, fabric, glass, those kind of household things.
Yeah.
Now the buildings are a UNESCO World Heritage Center. There's a museum and this huge fish market and lots of restaurants. It's bustling.
At least it was during the summer when we were there. I'm not sure what the winter is like, but it's just a lovely town with lots of sort of levels to it and built around a large harbor. We saw ships coming in and out all day. Really nice.
To see the city from another viewpoint, you can take a funicular to the top of Mount Floyen. It is 1,050 feet or 320 meters above sea level. So it's pretty high. And from up there, Bergen looks like a toy miniature.
Yeah.
The sky and the water just kind of stretching out in all directions. The mountaintop is the starting point for a network of hiking trails, so you can hang out in nature. And if you want to have a sleepover adventure, there's a treehouse called the Cone. It looks like a pine cone, a giant pine cone perched halfway up the tree. And for about $150, you can spend the night.
Oh, that's fun.
One of the reviews says, "We were rocked like babies into a sweet dream to the sound of drumming raindrops on the roof. Truly a wonderful night that we will never forget."
That sounds great.
You have to get up there by a little ladder. Is it wrong that one of my unforgettable experiences in Bergen was a hot dog?
If it was wrong, I don't want to be right.
We are not alone. Norwegians eat about 100 hot dogs per person annually, which comes to 450 million per year. It's their national snack. The hot dog stand is called the hot dog stand that you're meant to go to.
Yeah.
Is called Tree Kroneren, and it's been serving delicious dogs since 1946. They have wild game sausage, reindeer sausage, lamb sausage, cheese sausage, smoked sausage, and traditional franks. So you pick your meat, and then you add toppings like crispy French fried onions, lingonberry jam, mustard. Do you remember what you had on yours?
I had a cheese dog with lingonberry jam and mustard and some onions on top.
I had the wild game sausage, which had a lot of flavor, and lingonberry jam, the crispy onions, and mayo. I have to say that I would never have thought to put mayo on a hot dog before that day. June 28th, 2023 will now go down in history.
Yeah.
Because that was amazing, and I would definitely do that again.
Yeah. I feel like that's a day we should celebrate every year with hot dog variations.
I should also mention that we also ate hot dogs in Oslo. They're a big deal there too.
Yeah.
Back in the 1980s, there were 200 hot dog stands in Oslo.
Oh, really?
But now, Siverskiosken is the last one still standing. That little dog stand we went to is the last one in Oslo.
Really? Huh. It was so cute. It's sort of tucked into an alley. It feels funky. You get your hot dog and you sit on a little bench in an alley and with maybe a table with a bunch of other strangers because everybody else is coming for the same thing.
Yeah. The surprise there is potatoes.
How so?
You garnish your hot dog with potato. You don't remember this? Their classic hot dogs, they're preset, here's some choices for you, are topped with potato salad or mashed potatoes. And the hot dogs are served in a traditional flatbread made from potatoes called lumpa.
How could I forget the lumpa?
I have no idea. That was life-changing.
Yeah, it was good. I remember it was delicious.
I mean, potato on potato action?
Yeah.
10 out of 10.
Yeah.
Would do again.
With some sausage in there.
Other delicious things to eat in Norway include meatballs and gravy with mashed potatoes, kind of like Swedish meatballs, but slightly different.
Yep. I mean, they're next door.
Lots of seafood, like pickled herring and smoked salmon. And I will also say, pro tip, do not pass up any opportunity to eat an open-faced sandwich with shrimp, mayo, and dill, because it is glorious. Another must-try that I was very excited about, which 100% lived up to expectations, is brunost, or the brown cheese.
Oh, yeah. Kind of a caramelized cheese.
It's not even technically a cheese, although that's what they call it. It has a texture kind of like soft cheddar.
Yeah.
But it tastes like caramel and cheese went on a date and flirted with peanut butter.
Yeah, it's got a sort of flavor profile that seems like it'd be good with some crackers, either some sort of saltine or butter kind of crackers, and then maybe some of that lingonberry jam that I enjoyed on the hot dog.
Some places also serve it with Norwegian waffles.
Yeah, I could say that.
It's one of those things that when you take your first bite, it kind of makes you tilt your head like a German Shepherd or a Husky, like,
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
And then you kind of can't stop eating it.
Yeah.
Once you've explored the cities, you want to get out into nature
Yeah.
and maybe hang out with some Vikings. The first stop has to be the fjords. You might remember from social studies class that the fjords are long, narrow inlets of the sea with steep cliffs on either side. Science says they were carved by glaciers. But I say they look like a giant troll was just having a little rest and running his fingers through the coastline.
Yeah. I knew what fjords were, and I've heard that since I was a kid. And I was not really prepared for how amazing they are to sort of experience firsthand.
Dramatic.
The rock and the water and the waterfalls and the nearby trees and the sort of every once in a while there's a tucked in house somewhere.
Cute little red Lego house.
Yeah. Really nice.
Obviously, the best way to see the fjords is by boat. You can take a ride on a dinner cruise, a catamaran, a sailboat, a kayak, a ferry, or a whale watching boat. But I would like to recommend the fjord safari. The boat for the fjord safari is a rigid, inflatable boat. It's like a luxury raft, if such a thing exists.
If you took a sort of blow-up raft in your head, just one of those yellow blow-up rafts, and you imagined it as being sort of industrialized to be stronger, bigger, more capable, able to stand up to Norwegian water in winter and all that stuff, and then you put an enormous engine on the back of the thing so you could get some speed out of it.
Plus seating for 12 and very helpful handles.
Yeah, and seat belts and a variety of safety equipment because you're going to go really fast on the water.
It feels like flying. Before you get on the boat, you get suited up in waterproof neon yellow coveralls and goggles.
Yeah.
And I was like, goggles? Do I really need goggles? Yes. I was so grateful for the goggles.
It's literally an adventure where they make you change your clothes first, which is always a sign.
A sign of something.
Something's going to happen. Something you probably weren't already prepared for. So we're going to make you change your clothes.
When we took off down that fjord, and okay, first of all, we started out going fast because the tour guide knows that's what you want to do when you first get into the boat. But then we slowed down. We saw waterfalls and little fairy tale villages. We saw some goats wandering around the cliffs. And every once in a while, he would pull into an inlet and tell us some history.
Yeah.
And then we would go fast again.
Yeah. And it was great because he was a local. So he was able to sort of say, well, this is the old, old man Skarsgård used to live here and now it's empty, or his son lives over here or whatever. It was great.
I don't think anyone could tell because I was wearing my goggles, but I was so excited and overwhelmed. I cried inside my goggles for the first 10 minutes.
Oh, that's nice.
The next adventure you might want to consider is a visit to a Viking village. The Viking era started around 800 and lasted until 1050.
250 years of badass Viking.
The first known Viking raid was in 793 at the Lindisfarne Monastery in England. I want to read you this little bit from a contemporary account of the time.
Okay.
Here were dreadful forewarnings come over the land and woefully terrified the people. These were amazing sheets of lightning and whirlwinds, and fiery dragons were seen flying in the sky. Shortly after, in the same year, the woeful inroads of heathen men destroyed God's church in Lindisfarne by fierce robbery and slaughter.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Vikings also seem like one of those things where it's easy to romanticize now, but in the time, it would have been awful.
Terrifying.
Probably on both sides, right? Probably hard to be a Viking. Certainly hard to be raided by Vikings.
Well, and this is the kind of stereotypical picture that most people have of Vikings, right? They're marauding, they're pillaging,
yeah,
they're drinking mead, they're probably stealing your women.
They got pet wolves and pet ravens.
And dragons.
And dragons. I wonder how they made the dragon appear.
But also, The Vikings who stayed home in Norway were farmers and artisans and craftspeople, which brings me to the Viking Village.
Right.
It's a recreation of a Viking settlement. And when I say it's tucked into a valley, I feel like you're going to get a picture in your mind of what that looks like. I don't know if I can adequately describe how the Viking Village is like if you imagine a V, the Viking Village is in the bottom point of the V, and the cliffs are just right there, stretching up into the mist with waterfalls trickling down them.
And their feet from the water of the fjord, too.
There are 18 buildings in the settlement, and a Viking tour guide takes you around and tells you stories of everyday life. The bits he shared about how they dyed fabric were fascinating. And then you get to go to the chief's house and meet the chief.
Yeah.
And walk around in his sitting room,
Yeah.
which was a little intimidating.
Sure, because he's the chief of a Viking tribe.
And then we got to try axe throwing.
Yeah. We did.
It was much harder than it looked.
Yeah.
If you plan ahead, you can also book a private lesson with a blacksmith or have a private Viking dinner held in one of the houses.
Oh, well, that sounds awesome.
I know. We have to go back.
Yeah.
When you're finished hanging out with the Vikings, you need to meet some other locals. The bears and foxes and reindeer and wolves at the Bjørn Parken, or Bear Park. The Bear Park is an open-air zoo, but zoo is a misnomer almost because it feels more like a wilderness park that happens to have animals in it. It's like a hike, but safe.
The enclosures are enormous. For at least the bears, you walk on an elevated platform around their area, basically looking for them inside of this enclosure. When we were there, we were lucky enough to be there for feeding time. And so they had staff come out. They threw them things and the bears came out and waved and sort of rummaged around for the food. And
they have platforms they can climb up.
Yeah, right.
It was thrilling to see a bear stand on his hind legs and reach up onto the platform to get a strawberry.
Yeah.
A strawberry with his giant bear claws.
Or catch an apple in flight.
Yeah. You can also go into an enclosure with the foxes and feed them out of your hand.
Yeah.
Very exciting.
Yeah.
The park is set up really well. If you go for the whole day, they give you a schedule that guides you through the park. And you can see feedings of tortoises, bears, lynxes, leopards, wolves, reindeer. It's just like being a Disney prince or princess for the day. To summarize, when you go to Norway, eat a hot dog, visit the bears and foxes, get on at least one boat, and be prepared to gawp at some of the most stunningly beautiful scenery in the world.
Yeah.
That's the Norway 101.
Oh, that's awesome.
Feel the beat. This game's not for the weak or keep. Two truths and a lie. Ignite, we'll dance until the morning light.
Are you ready for two truths and a lie?
I will do my best.
I'm about to say 3 statements. Only 2 of them are true. Mel doesn't know which is the lie. Here are the statements. Number 1, the first 7 notes of the Christmas carol Deck the Halls are identical to the first 7 notes of the Norwegian national anthem.
I just started singing Deck the Halls in my head.
Number 2, the Norwegian government is heading a vast global scheme to line the pockets of the wealthy.
That doesn't sound right.
And number 3, Norwegians celebrate Easter by cosplaying as rabbits. All right, so in order, the first 7 notes of the Christmas carol Deck the Halls are identical to the first 7 notes of the Norwegian national anthem.
I'll say that's true.
That is true. So here's the carol. And here's Norway's national anthem. The national anthem of Norway is Ja, vi elsker det landet, which in English just means, yes, we love this country. It was adopted recently. It only became the national anthem in 2019.
Oh, wow. Did they not have one before that?
Before that, the national anthem was Coolio's Gangsta's Paradise.
That's a lie.
Yeah, that is a lie. But that song spent 14 weeks at number 1 on the Norwegian charts back in 1995, which I just think is a delightful idea. The Norwegians walking by the fjords in their wool hats singing.
Been spending most their life living in gangster's paradise. Been spending most their lives living in gangster's paradise.
No, before 5 years ago, they just didn't have a national anthem.
Wow.
Yeah. Number 2, the Norwegian government is heading a vast global scheme to line the pockets of the wealthy.
Balls.
It's true.
What?
Yeah, it's true if you consider every Norwegian citizen wealthy. And they are. The story begins in the 1960s when vast oil reserves were found off of Norway's coast. So to give you some perspective, in 2022, Norway exported $58 billion worth of crude oil. They are the 8th largest exporter in the world, and they have been doing that kind of business for the last 50 years. The Norwegian government faced a dilemma when oil revenues started flowing in the 70s. They knew that sudden wealth from natural resources could destabilize the economy. They obviously didn't want that. At the same time, oil was a huge windfall, so they wanted to be smart about what they were going to do. And their foresight led them to make some strong decisions. They decided not to sell the rights to an oil company and walk away with the cash, which a whole lot of people have done. They wanted to be involved. They negotiated deals where oil companies would come and educate Norwegians on how to extract the oil from the sea and process it. And they mandated that the oil be processed in Norway, which provided a whole lot of jobs doing that. But maybe the most innovative thing they did was also the most boring. They set up a fund and they put the proceeds from the oil into it. And they hired financial people to help manage that fund. But they also hired philosophers. They hired moral philosophers. They are there to guide the funds in ways that align with Norway's values. So what is the right thing to do here? And it's both sort of at the moment when they started making the money, what are we going to do? But also every investment gets reviewed.
That's amazing.
Yeah. And they invested the fund. They bought stocks and real estate. They spent some on renewable energy. They avoided morally questionable investments. They demonstrated ethical wealth management. Currently, they own hundreds of buildings in foreign cities and stock in about 9,000 companies in 70 different countries. The fund is worth about $1.5 trillion, or a little under $300,000 a citizen. They spend about 3% of the fund yearly on government projects, and they invest the rest. And it's all kept well in view. There's a site where you can go and see what the fund is worth and where the money's being invested. The Norwegians are protecting their country's future. The fund is currently a bigger financial boon to Norway than the oil and will likely always be.
That is so cool.
Yeah.
Ethical wealth. I like that.
Yeah, ethical wealth management is like, what? How do those words go together?
I like the sound of it.
The fund protects their way of life. So from free medical care for pregnant women to comprehensive pension for retired people to free education for all Norwegians, the Norwegian government stands up for its people, and it's evident in the positive impact of the fund on their welfare. Which brings us to number 3.
Bunny cosplay.
Yeah, Norwegians celebrate Easter by cosplaying as rabbits. As much as I would like that to be true, I made that up, but
I'm so disappointed.
yeah, what they do is unusual, though. Norwegians celebrate Easter with crime fiction.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah.
It's not as good as being a giant bunny, but it's pretty good.
It's still pretty good. It's even got a name, Påskekrim, which translates to Easter crime. According to random Norwegians on the internet, it started in the 1920s when a publishing house had a marketing campaign for a crime novel. The story was about a train robbery during Easter. That hit the Norwegians during a holiday when they have a lot of free time. So school is closed for a week. Most people have a few days off. If you have a mountain cabin, Easter might be your last chance to go skiing. So head to the mountains, ski a little bit, and then read some crime books. The campaign did well enough to bring something similar back the following year, and then the next, and it got bigger and bigger. In the last century, it has expanded into all media. So during Easter weekend, there are marathons of crime shows on TV.
That's amazing.
Newspapers have mysteries you can solve. There are radio broadcasts. Bookstores set aside extra space for the season. People will play murder mystery games. And every year, there's a parade of new crime novels and author events. If you want to celebrate Easter like the Norwegians do, we will remind you in the spring that Easter and crime fiction are coming. That is Two Truths and a Lie.
At LinkedIn, we know hiring is a big deal for your small business. Sometimes it can feel a little, overwhelming. LinkedIn uses data that you can't find anywhere else to give you the best candidates, all so you can feel confident you're hiring the best person for the job. And even a little, hiring bliss. See why 86% of small businesses who post a job on LinkedIn get a qualified candidate within a day. Post a job for free at linkedin.com/achieve. LinkedIn, your next great hire is here.
These are fly boats.
Book 1.
My first recommendation is The Bell in the Lake, written by Lars Midding and translated by Deborah Dawkin. This is historical fiction with a very satisfying veil of the supernatural draped over it. It's set in a fictional Norwegian village in 1879, and it weaves together the legend of conjoined twins, magical bells, a mystical church, and a love triangle.
Wow.
Yeah.
Which genre are we in?
All of them. The book begins with the story of the Hackney sisters. Halfrid and Grunhild were conjoined twins known far and wide for their weaving skills, including a tapestry that depicted the Day of Judgment.
Conjoined twins sitting side by side at a loom in the 1800s is really creepy.
After their deaths, twin bells were cast in their memory, and a lock of hair from each girl was mixed into the silver of the bells. Legend says that the bells would ring on their own to warn of approaching evil.
Wow, this got creepy.
And that's all just backstory. The story hasn't even started yet.
Okay.
Generations later, we meet our heroine, Astrid. She is a descendant of the sisters, and she's a dreamer. I want to read a little bit that made me fall in love with Astrid. Astrid often imagined herself on a train and never tired of this one thought, that real life was happening elsewhere, that everyday life was just a delay. But she had no idea where she wanted to go. These dreams were just a ladder that went up and ended in thin air. Her thoughts transported her to different places every day, and the only thing she knew was that she was searching for something, and that whatever it was not in the village.
That's a lot of longing.
Tough to be stuck in a village in 1879.
Yeah.
Then 2 men arrive in the village and bring a bit of the outside to Astrid's small world. The first is a new pastor. He has modern ideas, but very murky motivations. And the second is a German architect and artist from Dresden. The village's twin bells and its historic stave church are central to the secret plans of both men. Now we have to take a short detour to talk about stave churches.
Oh, all right.
These are churches that were built in the Middle Ages, mostly in Norway, but also Iceland, Sweden, Denmark, and Germany. They're made entirely from wood that's slathered with a protective coat of black tar.
They're very impressive because they're about the size of, a small town church. They're a couple of stories tall. They could look like they could hold a couple hundred people. And there is not a single nail in the place.
All just put together with interlocking wood.
Yeah.
They look really higgledy-piggledy and almost whimsical until you get up close. And then you can see that they're decorated with pagan symbols like dragon heads and serpents.
Yeah.
And there's some Christian crosses.
Yeah.
And all of that is put together to ward off evil spirits.
Yeah, there's a really interesting combination of Christian ideas and pagan ideas kind of fighting for each other in this building.
And it turns out in history, which is partially what this book is about. So back to our village, the bells, the church, and our girl Astrid. She has previously turned down marriage proposals from local farm boys, but the newly arrived pastor and the idealistic city boy have turned her head a little bit. Hello, love triangle. There are like lingering gazes and stolen moments. But then Astrid learns about a secret deal between the two of them. The two men have been working on a scheme to remove the bells and dismantle the church.
Oh.
Astrid is not having this.
Yeah.
And she channels all of her passion into stopping them. And then things get messy.
Things sounded pretty messy before that.
So I really loved the way this book tells a historically accurate story, but has a Gothic sensibility.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it really brings to life how brutal it was, both physically and emotionally, to live in rural Norway.
Yeah.
And how challenging it was to be making the march toward the modern. There's a bit early in the book that says, change came slowly. The village was 20 years behind its neighboring villages, which were 30 years behind Norway's towns and cities, which were 50 years behind the rest of Europe.
That's not hard to imagine.
In this book, at least, much of village life was still guided by superstition. And Astrid's kind of trapped between her warring desire to keep her connection to the past. She loves the church and the bells, but also she's really attracted to what's new, what's next, and how she can get out there and explore.
Yeah.
So I read this book before we went to Norway, specifically because I knew we were going to visit the Bergen stave church. That one was built around 1200, and I think it looks like a witch's house.
It definitely looks mystical.
It's got multiple dragons and crosses on each of its gables, and it sits in the middle of this tiny cemetery in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah.
Like, it was really easy to stand on the threshold and imagine villagers walking across the hills to get there. And inside, it's all shadowy and quiet. You could easily imagine the bells ringing on their own to tell you something dangerous is about to happen.
It was fun thinking about all the different people who walked over that threshold in that time, too.
Hundreds of years.
Yeah.
This book is the first in a planned trilogy. The second book is also available now. It's set in the same village and focuses on that tapestry woven by the twin sisters. The author has said you could read them in any order. This one is The Bell in the Lake by Lars Mitting and translated by Deborah Dawkin. One more thing about stave churches. During the Middle Ages, there were more than 1,000 of them. Today, only 28 remain.
Whoa.
In Norway. So I'll put links in show notes about how you can visit the stave churches, and there's a really nice 2-minute video tour of the Bergen church.
And now book 2.
My first book is We Die Alone, a World War II epic of escape and endurance by David Howarth. This is an adventure story set during World War II. It's nonfiction. It starts in Shetland.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Fun.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, I guess it's not that fun based on the title.
At the time, yeah, not so great. Shetland is the cold islands off of Scotland's north coast. It's March of 1943. There's a team of 4 men. They've been training for many months to go over to Norway. Norway's occupied. They're going to go there and sabotage a Nazi air base that dominates that area. And their further plan is to sort of set up a resistance movement. The mission goes horribly. They get on a boat that looks like a Norwegian fisher with a team of 8 other men. They load it with 8 tons of explosives. They make the dangerous wintertime crossing to Norway. And they go to make contact with a local man who they've been told is a known resistance supporter. He's a shopkeeper, and he runs a small grocery store that he named after himself. So the resistance group sends a couple of guys over there to make contact, and they meet the grocer, and they're about 2/3 of the way through that conversation, right after the "we're from England" part, when they realize they are talking to the wrong guy.
Oh, no.
The supporter died a few months earlier, and a different man bought his shop. Both of the men who owned the shop had the same name.
Wow.
First and last. Yeah. So the new guy kept the shop's name the same. And when they approached him and said, "Hey, are you?" He said, "Yeah." The new guy is not a supporter.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, he's worried that the men who came to his store are really a test from the Gestapo sent to test his loyalty.
Sure.
And then early the following day, the grocer calls the authorities.
Oh, no.
The now alerted Germans find the boat. There's a scene where our heroes blow up the boat so the Nazis can't get their hand on the explosives or their plans. This happens while they're being fired upon by the approaching Nazi warboat. And very shortly, most of the men are rounded up. And within about 72 hours, everyone who was part of that operation is dead, except for one man. His name is Jan Balsrud. The book is the story of how Jan got from the freezing water near the burning boat to the neutral territory of Sweden, about 125 miles away, or about 200 kilometers. Now, I can only tell you a little bit more, or it'll ruin the story.
That was a pretty dramatic setup.
Yeah, that all happens in the first chapter or two.
Amazing.
And the rest of it is just a ride. Before it's over, Jan will suffer from hypothermia, frostbite, delirium, gangrene, and snow blindness. He'll be helped by Norwegian villagers and nomadic reindeer herders, the Sami we talked about, most of whom take on the responsibility of hiding a fugitive with grace. Jan will avoid the Nazis, sometimes on skis, sometimes barely. One of the details that struck me is that the time of the year becomes a factor in keeping Jan hidden. The Norwegians want to get him out of the country before it's sunny all day. It's like, oh, right. That would be a problem. And in the end, it takes Jan a little under 3 months to travel the 125 miles, and the trip will almost kill him a few times. The book was first published in 1955. Some passages haven't aged that well. It's just a few. There's some sort of stuff about what men do and that kind of thing. But for the most part, it holds up. Before he started writing, the author, David Howarth, was a World War II special operations executive, or what we would call a spy. He helped set up the Shetland bus, which was an operation that ran men and supplies from Shetland to Nazi-occupied Norway and back. Because this book was written so soon after the war, he got to talk to the people involved. So he's seen all of the places where Jan hid. And there's a very satisfying epilogue with just a little bit of romance.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah. After the author returned to civilian life, he wrote a book about the experience. He enjoyed doing that so much that he branched out into general military history. The story of Jan Balsrud means so much to the Norwegians that there is still an annual 8-day event based on it.
Like a race event?
Yeah. And, well, it's a march. Yeah.
Wow. In
late July, there's a 200-kilometer march that goes from Tromsø in Norway in his honor. If you're curious, Jan lived to be 71.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Because I remember you reading this book, and I felt like every other day at breakfast, you were telling me how he was almost dead in a different way.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it's amazing how many ways you can die out in the Norwegian wilderness.
And he survived them.
And he did, yeah. After Jan's escape, he eventually returned to active service, which...
What?
Exactly.
He didn't go to, like, I don't know, a tropical island or something?
Yeah, he did not. He went back to active service, and then when the war was over, he went back to his homeland. He died in 1988. He never considered himself a hero. He always thought the Norwegians who saved him deserved all the credit. And Jan is now buried under a stone with his name and a sentence. The sentence says in Norwegian, "Thank you to all who helped me to freedom in 1943. This book is a fantastic true life adventure. It will definitely give you a strong sense of northern Norway, what it's like and the people who live there. It's We Die Alone, a World War II epic of escape and endurance by David Haworth.
Here's book 3.
My second recommendation is a thriller called The Hike by Lucy Clark. So I need to preface this by saying I love a long hike with pretty scenery and snacks along the way, and then a huge lunch and a nap after.
Yeah.
I'm not a fan of hikes that continue past lunchtime, nor am I up for camping.
Right.
This book has done absolutely nothing to change my mind about those rules.
All right. If you have any ideas about what Mel could read that would make her want to go camping, let us know.
Keep them to yourself. This is the story of 4 lifelong friends who embark on a multi-day hike in the Norwegian wilderness, and everything goes wrong. We meet each of the 4 women in succession, and the narrative unfolds in alternating points of view. And for me, that is an invitation to assign actresses to play them.
Of course.
So first up is a successful doctor with twins, a boy and a girl. Unbeknownst to her friends, her seemingly perfect marriage is on the rocks. She is played by Florence Pugh.
Okay.
The second friend is played by Gemma Arterton.
Oh.
Because she's described in the book as having a bob with perfect bangs.
Gemma Arterton doesn't often make it into your book castings.
She made it this time because of the perfect bob with the bangs.
Yeah.
Her character is single, but might be pregnant. None of us know because she's too scared to take the pregnancy test she's holding in her hand as she's packing to go on the hiking trip.
Wow. That's a choice.
Next is the pretty mother hen of the group. She is divorced with a daughter that she dotes on. She's Keira Knightley. And finally, there's a famous rock singer whose life is kind of a mess, but she's famous.
Yeah.
I cast her as Sienna Miller.
Oh, good one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so as it is with old friends, these girls are devoted to each other, but they have a long shared history. So there are old wounds and arguments that flare up at the worst moments. Every year, the 4 of them go on holiday together, which usually means lounging by a pool with cocktails. But this year, it was the doctor's turn to choose. And she's running away from her marital problems. So she decides she wants to go out into the wilderness and walk all day, hike around a fjord, and over a mountain. She wants to challenge herself.
Yeah.
She's also a little controlling. So she's given everyone workout plans and equipment lists, which they all pretty much ignored.
Yeah.
But tradition is tradition. So they set off together. Their first stop is the lodge where their adventure is going to begin. And right away, you can tell there's trouble. Tension is just kind of simmering right under the surface. Everyone's drinking a little too much. One of them hooks up with a local in the middle of the evening's festivities.
Really?
Yeah. I mean, she's young and single, but still.
Yeah.
And then they hear a creepy story about a girl who went missing on a similar hike a year ago. And a cranky old-timer chimes in with this. Some locals think that there is an energy about the place, a sense of something larger than us, that feeling of unease, of not being alone that isn't immediately explicable. It's where the mist hangs, chills you to the bone, not the temperature. It's a feeling, like something pressing on your chest. Blafjell is said to be a thin place. You know what that means? Where order meets chaos, where life meets death, where you see things you'd rather you hadn't, yeah? I don't go up the mountain. Stick to the forest, the river, the other peaks. Not Blafjell.
Oh, that's great.
That was my favorite moment in the book.
I love when the locals warn the incoming heroes. It's one of my favorite tropes in fiction is that second. I think the first time I remember seeing it was in American Werewolf in London.
Right.
Where they're in the pub and one of the guys says, "What's the pentagram on the wall for?"
Exactly. This is exactly that moment. If you read any advice for hiking in Norway, you get recommendations like, choose a trail based on your physical abilities, experience, and equipment. And don't get caught in the Instagram trap and assume that the hike will be easy.
Yeah.
And expect 4 seasons in a day and be willing to change your plans.
We saw that in the middle of summer.
We did. Our pretty ladies ignore all of this wisdom.
Yeah.
One of them tries to cross a raging river and is almost drowned because her pack is too heavy and it's pushing her under the water.
Oh, that's tragic.
There's a raging storm. They lose a tent and their map.
Yeah.
There's a landslide. A mysterious man silently appears on the trail, seemingly out of nowhere. And they are literally days from civilization with no phone service. As the external danger ratchets up, their own self-doubts are coming out in really ugly ways. Secrets are being revealed. A massive betrayal comes to light. And then it gets even more dangerous.
This doesn't go well.
Some of the situations in this book are kind of far-fetched until you think about the dynamics of a friend group and how competition and egos and unwillingness to go against the momentum of the group can kind of push people towards making bad decisions.
Sure.
Like every time they made kind of a boneheaded choice, I was like, wait, would someone really do that? And then I was like, yeah,
maybe, yeah.
they would. The author said she and her husband are very fit, active, more open to risk than I would be kind of people. He is a professional windsurfer.
Oh, all right.
And they went on a hike in Norway so that she could get real world experience while writing this book. And she talks about how, people told them to keep an eye on the weather, and then like this fog rolled in that they couldn't see through. And they got to a place where there was a sign that said, this trail is not safe. And they went anyway.
Oh.
So yes, real people do those things.
I feel like if Norwegians are telling me a trail isn't safe, it's not safe.
So I thought this novel was a hoot. It is perilous right out of the gate and it never lets up. The descriptions of the scenery are very good. You can see it so clearly, and it is really beautiful, even though in some cases it's actively trying to kill them.
Yeah.
And the ending was really satisfying. It's The Hike by Lucy Clark.
Book 4.
My next book is Norse Mythology by Neil Gaiman. I suspect I don't need to tell you who Neil Gaiman is, but just in case.
Let's talk about him anyway. I like him.
He's a very popular fantasy author. He wrote American Gods, which is a story about the gods of old walking the modern earth. That story has Anubis running a funeral parlor in Illinois, for instance. He wrote a book called The Graveyard Book about a young boy raised by ghosts in a graveyard. And he wrote Good Omens with his friend Terry Pratchett.
Wait, what? What is this Good Omens of which you speak?
Mel's a little bit of a fan. Good Omens is a story about an angel and a demon trying to prevent the apocalypse. They are doing it mainly because they've come to enjoy humans, or at least the things humans make. So whiskey and rock songs and cheeseburgers and books, that kind of thing. Like most authors, his stories tend to have a specific color, and maybe him more than most. His stories are fantastic and whimsical. The stories are a little dark, but they're not too dark. And he likes to draw the supernatural on a human scale. He's here to tell you a story with some stakes, but in the end, the good guys are probably going to come out on top. Gaiman wrote one of my favorite comic characters of all time, comic like comic books, not comic like funny. Mm-hmm. He got his start with a series called The Sandman in the 80s. And it feels like you can see all of Gaiman's start there. There's personification of metaphysical entities, which he also self-references by having one of the characters call one of the other characters a personification of a metaphysical entity. He blends together different mythologies. It's funny, and it's really, really good. The one character that stood out to me in that series was Death. In The Sandman, Death is presented as a somewhat capricious, clever, insightful 16-year-old goth girl.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah. And that rang so much truer to me than like the Grim Reaper or something, This girl's going to show up and and tell you it's time to go.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not personal, and she's not trying to scare you. She doesn't even really care that much. It's just time to go. But let's talk about Norse mythology. So I've read some mythology before, and some of it is like hearing somebody's dream, right? It's not good narrative.
Yeah.
The causality is wonkus.
Yeah.
And maybe there's a parable in there somewhere, but you're going to have to dig for it. There's some hints of national character or something, but it's hard to find it readable, I guess. I find it hard to listen to for too long or my mind starts wandering off. And there is just a little bit of that in this book. The first short story or two are about the beginning of the world. We read about the Yggdrasil, which is the tree at the center of existence. It has 9 worlds in its branches, and we read the story of Odin losing his eye to gain the gift of wisdom. And those stories are maybe a page or two each, and they're sort of mostly scene setting. And then for me, the book settles down into a pretty delightful read. We read about Thor and his unyielding hammer, and about that scheming Loki, and about why we have poetry. We read about the end times, Ragnarok, and the renewal after. The gods are petty and tempestuous and quick to anger and jealous, vindictive, and somehow still funny and kind of lovable. Gaiman takes the old stories and he tunes them for a modern audience. So he writes good dialogue, he throws in some motive, he makes the characters sing a little bit more. I'm going to read you the beginning of one of the stories. It's about half a page. Before I get going, you should know that the Aesir are the gods who live in Asgard. Thor's wife was the beautiful Sif. She was of the Aesir. Thor loved her for herself and for her blue eyes and her pale skin, her red lips and her smile, and he loved her long, long hair, the color of a field of barley at the end of summer. Thor woke and stared at sleeping Sif. He scratched his beard, and then he tapped his wife with a huge hand. "What happened to you?" he asked. She opened her eyes, the color of the summer sky. "What are you talking about?" she asked, and then she moved her head and looked puzzled. Her fingers reached up to her bare pink scalp and touched it, exploring it tentatively. She looked at Thor, horrified. "My hair," was all she said. Thor nodded. "It's gone," he said. "He has left you bald." "He?" asked Sif. Thor said nothing. He strapped on his belt of power, Megingjord, which doubled his enormous strength. "Loki," he said. "Loki has done this." "Why do you say that?" asked Sif, touching her bald head frantically, as if the fluttering touch of her fingers would make her hair return. "Because," said Thor, "when something goes wrong, the first thing I always think is, this is Loki's fault. It saves a lot of time."
That is awesome. Okay, you guys couldn't see me, but I was literally like, my hand went to my cheek when we got to the part about her hair being gone. And then I was kind of holding my breath to see what was going to happen. That was so good.
Yeah, like all of these stories sort of beg to be read out loud, if not performed. There are scholars online who sneer a little bit at this book.
Whatever.
Yeah, they seem to thump their ancient tomes and say, that's not the real myth.
Okay.
Yeah, which I don't know, tickles me a little bit. I mean, it's a story. We have fragments of old myths, and Gaiman took those and made them a better story. And that's how myths work. If you're in a situation where it's essential to keep our historically accurate Norse mythology straight, this book might be overreaching. But for most of us, this is just a bunch of charming stories about the Norse gods. And if anything, I think the book will ultimately benefit scholarly mythology by opening the door.
One of the things that drives me crazy about that argument is that the original still exists.
Yeah.
So you can just read that and enjoy it. You can read the new one and go back and look at the old one and compare and contrast them. The new one doesn't ruin the old one.
Yeah.
They're friends.
It's so true. This book is charming. It's fun. It's got a strong sense of a storyteller sitting around a fire in a Viking village. It's Norse mythology by Neil Gaiman.
Here's book 5.
My final recommendation is The Sunlit Night by Rebecca Dinerstein Knight. This is a coming-of-age novel and unusual love story. It's about two broken-hearted people who run away to the Lofoten Islands when their lives fall apart.
Oh, that's too bad.
We've got two main characters.
Okay.
First up is Frances. She's 21 years old and an artist in New York City. She lives in a tiny, very Manhattan apartment with her parents and her sister. The description of it is hilarious. The parents sleep in the living room. The sisters share a room. The parents' bed, when they unfold it, reaches all the way to the doorknob on the door. Like it's a tiny Manhattan apartment.
Yeah.
She has just returned from a weekend at her boyfriend's family estate outside the city, during which she was surprise dumped by her boyfriend.
Mm.
So when she gets home, she's in emotional tatters. She's sitting around the table with her family, and she finds out that her sister has just gotten engaged, and her parents make a very big life announcement, which I won't divulge here because it'll ruin it.
This doesn't sound like it's going well at all.
No, things are going poorly for Frances.
Yeah.
It's all told in a blackly funny way, but these are some bad things that are happening to her.
Right.
Our other main character is Yasha. He's 17 and he's an emigre from Russia. He lives with his father, who he adores. His mother is not in the picture, and I'm not going to ruin the story by sharing the details, but her backstory is a corker. Yasha and his dad own the best bread bakery in Brighton Beach. But then a series of circumstances prompt them to take a trip back to Russia. So we've got all of our characters in these big life transitions.
Always a good place to start a story.
Yes. It's unclear to what degree Frances and Yasha are running away from something versus towards something, but they both end up in Lofoten. And then hijinks ensue.
Okay.
This book has a very strong sense of place. The details of the Manhattan apartment and the Brooklyn neighborhood just immerse you right there. And then when it moves to Lofoten, you can feel how disconnected from those places these far north Norwegian islands really are. For Frances to get there, she takes a flight to Oslo, an 18-hour train ride past the Arctic Circle, and then a final 4-hour ferry ride across the fjord to get to Lofoten.
Wow, I didn't know it was 4 hours on a ferry in addition to, that's quite a hike.
This is how she describes her arrival. The mountains we drove through were horrifying, many-peaked and oversized, a species of mountain far wilder than the snow-capped triangles of picture books. The fjord water that cut between the mountains was bright turquoise. Tall flowers grew along the side of the road. Behind the flowers rose sheer gray rock. We drove until we reached a clearing, in the middle of which stood a long house with a curved roof that ended in dragon gargoyles. A stake with a blue sign read, Borg. A shorter stake with a white sign read, Viking Museet, which means Viking Museum.
Sure.
In Lofoten, Frances works as the apprentice to an artist who paints with only the color yellow.
Huh.
Yeah. His current project is a barn called the Yellow Room, and it's covered with murals that, as Frances says, had harnessed the difference between mustard and saffron. In a month, inspectors will come to see if the work is worthy of being included in a tourist map of Norwegian artists.
Oh.
So there are some stakes here. As Frances paints her assigned wall in the Yellow Room each day, she gradually becomes part of the community. There are unusual locals who work at the Viking Museum. There's the artist who's kind of sullen. There's a pet ox, sheep, goats, ponies, and eventually, Yasha. The chapters alternate between points of view. Frances's chapters are narrated in her first-person voice. She's artistic and sensitive and also a little bit prickly. And I really liked seeing Lofoten through her eyes. The chapters about Yasha have a third-person narrator, and that makes his narrative more kind of fairy tale-like, especially because his story travels between Brooklyn and Moscow and bounces between the past and the present. So you have this kind of straightforward voice of Francis and this kind of fairy tale voice talking about Yasha. The tone of this book is not going to be for everybody. I really loved it, but the reviews are mixed.
Really?
Yes. The word quirky is used a lot.
Quirky seems to me to be a benefit.
I mean, I like quirky.
Yeah.
But this is maybe poignant quirky or melancholy quirky. It is not really whimsical. So more like Wes Anderson's The Royal Tannenbaums or Moonrise Kingdom and less like The Grand Budapest Hotel.
Okay.
To me, Francis and Yasha feel like real people because they make some really questionable decisions.
Mm.
And the other characters, like the pretend Viking at the museum and Yasha's mother and the artist that Francis is working with, are kind of heightened. They're a little bit cartoony. They're a little bit wacky, which turns up the humor and the pathos, but also makes the serious stuff that Francis and Yasha are going through a little bit more palatable. Because this story is really examining grief and how confusing life can be in the wake of a loss and what it's like to be an artist and how you move on to the next act of your life when a tragedy has befallen you.
So you've got this quirky little book about grief.
Yes. It also explores multiple love stories and the way granting grace for past mistakes to other people is freeing for both sides of that relationship. If you like stories about second chances, you have an affection for the offbeat, and you want to be transported to the far north Norway, this is a really good one. It's The Sunlit Night by Rebecca Dinerstein Knight.
Those are 5 books we love set in Norway. Visit our show notes at strongsenseofplace.com for links and details. We will point you to a video of Neil Gaiman talking about mythology. We'll show you the 2 movies that were based on the World War II escape from Norway.
I've got a video of people eating hot dogs at that magical hot dog stand that you do not want to miss.
We'll point you to the bear park. It'll all be great. And sign up for our newsletter at strongsenseofplace.com/sign up so we can remind you to pick up some crime fiction next Easter.
I will also say that we recently moved our newsletter to Substack, and on Tuesdays, we have a little chat going called Tuesday Tea, where we talk about books and travel, and it is delightful.
Yeah, it is.
There's such good conversation going on and so many great ideas for books and places to go see out in the world. Our Substack is free, so you should join us. It's really great.
Yeah, absolutely. Mel, where are we headed for our next episode?
Pack your sun hat and your sense of adventure. We're heading to the jungles of Panama.
Thanks for listening. We'll talk to you soon.
Can you actually change your personality if you want to? How does peer pressure work, and why is it so powerful? Should you ever really trust your gut when you make a big decision? These are just a few of the topics we've recently covered on my podcast, Something You Should Know. I'm the host, Mike Carruthers, and each episode of Something You Should Know covers multiple topics that are likely relevant to you. You'll discover things you can use in your life today, right now, like how to have a great conversation, how to be more courageous, the anatomy of the perfect apology, and much, much more. To date, there are over 1,000 episodes of Something You Should Know, and we've gotten over 4,000 mostly 5-star reviews. I invite you to check out Something You Should Know. Look for the bright yellow light bulb on the blue background. Something You Should Know, wherever you listen to podcasts.